The emergency beacon started screaming at 0400 station time, which meant I, Junior Safety Officer Vix of the Galactic Survival Standards Bureau, had exactly 12 minutes to gulp down my morning stimulant before the panic began. Tell me it's not another level 12, I muttered, sliding into my workstation while my supervisor, a hulking Corthan named Krell, loomed over the holographic display like a worried parent. Worse. Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, never a good sign. It's a formal complaint. From a human. I nearly choked. A complaint. About what? About designation KR-772. The Predator Moon. You know, the one with the acid rain, the carnivorous geology, and those delightful airborne parasites that burrow into your nervous system. The Class 12 Deathworld we certified last cycle. That's the one. Now, let me explain something about Class 12 Deathworlds. In the entire documented history of the Galactic Council, spanning 47,000 years, and encompassing 2,300 civilized species, exactly 9 planets have earned that designation. 9. These aren't just dangerous environments. These are places where reality itself seems personally offended by the concept of life. Worlds where evolution got drunk, picked a fight with physics, and somehow we're talking about planets that make volcanoes look like pleasant beach resorts, and this human, this singular member of the species that had only joined the Council 8 standard years ago, had filed paperwork. Official paperwork. With citations. What's the complaint? I asked, pulling up the file. Krell's mandibles clicked in what I'd learned was his version of a sardonic smile. Insufficient warning labels. The file loaded. I started reading. Then I read it again, certain I'd mistranslated something. Formal incident report filed by Marcus Webb, human, terror register location, KR-772, Sector 47B incident classification, safety protocol violation complaint summary. The Deathworld designation placard failed to adequately communicate the actual danger level. Arrived expecting extreme survival conditions per Class 12 standards. Found environment to be, quote, basically camping with extra steps. Request reclassification to Class 8 or lower. Also, the acid rain makes excellent coffee if you filter it twice. I looked at Krell. Krell looked at me. We looked at the report. Then we looked at each other again. He made coffee, I said slowly, with the acid rain. Keep reading. I scrolled down. There were attachments. 17 attachments. Photos. The first image showed Marcus Webb standing on a crystalline outcropping, surrounded by the indigenous predators we'd catalogued as shredder variants. These creatures were 8-legged nightmares with titanium density carapaces and neural toxin that could drop a Graxian battle tank. They were gathered around Webb-like, and I'm not exaggerating here, like domestic pets waiting for treats. He was scratching one behind its sensory cluster. The caption read, "Made friends with the locals. They are just big puppies once you establish dominance. Steve here loves belly rubs." He named it Steve, Krell said flatly. He named the apex predator Steve. The next photo showed Webb's campsite. Not a shelter. Not a fortified bunker. A campsite. With a fire. He'd somehow created fire on a planet where the atmospheric moisture content was 87% sulfuric compounds. There was a makeshift tent constructed from local plant fibers, the same fibers that had dissolved 3 probe droids during our initial survey. He was roasting something on a stick. Is that, I zoomed in, is that a venom eel? A juvenile venom eel, Krell corrected. You know, the species whose adult form can bite through starship hull plating. He's eating it. He's eating it. The subsequent images were somehow worse. Webb collecting the acid rain in containers made from hollowed-out shredder carapaces. Webb using bioluminescent fungi as reading lights. Webb constructing what appeared to be a functional water filtration system from rocks, vines, and what I desperately hoped wasn't shredder intestine. The final photo showed Webb giving a thumbs-up gesture to the camera, standing ankle-deep in what our geological surveys had identified as a spontaneous lava seep zone. He was wearing shorts. Shorts. And a shirt that read, "I survived KR-772, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, and severe radiation poisoning. Just kidding, I'm fine." The radiation levels in that zone were enough to sterilize a colony ship. How long was he there? I asked. Krell pulled up the timeline. 47 days. 40. We recommend a maximum surface exposure of 4 hours with full hazard gear. He brought a backpack. And something called a Swiss Army knife. I sat back, feeling my respiratory system struggle with the implications. We need to interview him. He's in waiting room 7. He came here. Personally. Took a commercial shuttle. Apparently he was in the neighborhood. 10 minutes later, I was staring across a standard issue conference table at Marcus Webb. He looked, annoyingly, completely healthy. Tan. Relaxed. Like he'd just returned from a spa retreat instead of spending 6 weeks on a planet that had killed 4 survey teams. Thanks for seeing me, Webb said, leaning back in his chair with an easy confidence that made my scales itch. I know you folks are busy. Mr. Webb, I began, trying to maintain professional composure, your report is highly irregular. Look, I don't want to be a problem. But your Class 12 rating really oversold it. He shrugged. I went in prepared for, certain death. Maybe having to eat my own leg. The usual Deathworld stuff. The usual, I repeated. Instead, it was pretty chill. Nice weather, if you don't count the acid rain, but that's just free water purification, if you think about it. The local wildlife was aggressive at first, but that's standard territorial behavior. You just have to show them you're not prey. Brell's translator squawked as he tried to form words. How, exactly, does one show a shredder variant that you're not prey? Oh, you just punch them in the sensory cluster. Firmly. They respect that. Webb said this like he was explaining how to train a puppy. After the first couple, word spreads. Animals talk to each other, Well, not talk, but they communicate. You punched, I said carefully, an armored predator whose bite force exceeds 4,000 psi. Well, yeah. I mean, what else was I gonna do? Run? That triggers their chase instinct. Everyone knows that. Everyone did not, in fact, know that. Mr. Webb, our xenobiological studies indicate that KR-772 has a 97% lethality rate for carbon-based life forms within the first 72 hours of exposure. Sure, if you're not paying attention. He pulled out a datapad, handmade apparently, covered in what looked like dried mud and bite marks. I took notes. See, the thing your surveys missed is that the ecosystem follows a pretty standard circadian predation cycle. The really dangerous stuff only comes out during the magnetic storms. You just have to shelter during those periods. I dug a burrow the second day. A burrow. Into the side of a hill, yeah. Reinforced it with those volcanic rock formations. They're actually super stable once you understand the crystal matrix structure. Made a pretty cozy little cave. Even had a chimney. Krell made a sound like grinding gravel. The rock formations that our probes identified as violently unstable due to their radioactive half-life. Oh, that. Webb waved a hand dismissively. That's only a problem if you stack them wrong. You've got to respect the grain. Like woodworking, but spicier. I wanted to put my head down on the table. Instead, I pulled up the official survey data. Mr. Webb, in your professional opinion, having survived this environment, what classification would you assign KR-772? He considered this, actually stroking his chin like he was weighing a serious scientific question. Honestly. Class 7, maybe Class 8 if you're being conservative. It's definitely challenging, don't get me wrong. But it's manageable. I've been to state parks on Earth that were sketchier. State parks. Yeah, recreational wilderness areas. Yellowstone has geysers that'll cook you. Australia has like 17 things that want to kill you before breakfast. This was basically that, but with better stargazing. I looked at my notes. Then at Webb. Then at Krell, who had reached some kind of emotional breaking point where his translator had simply given up and was emitting a steady whine. Mr. Webb, I said, I'm going to need you to explain, in detail, exactly what you consider to be an actual dangerous environment. He brightened. Oh. Well, there was this one time in the Congo Basin, and that's when I realized we'd made a terrible mistake. Not in our classification of KR-772. That was accurate. We'd made a mistake in thinking we understood what humans considered dangerous. We were going to need to redo every single Deathworld rating in the database. Marcus Webb was 3 hours into his explanation of that time in the Congo Basin, when I realized 2 things. First, Earth was absolutely a Class 15 Deathworld, except we didn't have a Class 15, because we'd never imagined needing one. Second, humans had evolved in an environment so catastrophically hostile that their idea of dangerous had been permanently broken. So anyway, Webb continued, munching on something he'd pulled from his backpack that looked disturbingly alive, the hippo charged, which is basically a death sentence, because those things kill more people annually than any other large animal in Africa. And I'm thinking, okay Marcus, this is it. This is how you die, trampled into paste by an angry river horse. But then I remembered I had a tactical flashlight, right? So I shine it directly in its eyes, and it just stops. Confused. Gives me enough time to get up a tree. The creature, Krell said slowly, his translator having recovered from its earlier breakdown, was deterred by a handheld light source. Well, yeah. Predators rely on predictable prey behavior. You do something weird, it confuses them. Buys you time. Webb took another bite of whatever horror he was eating. Same principle worked on the shredders. They expected me to run or freeze. I yelled at them instead. In English. They don't speak English, obviously, but the confidence throws them off. I pulled up Earth's planetary file on my secondary screen. Started reading. Kept reading. Did not stop reading for 20 minutes, while Webb cheerfully described 7 other near-death experiences he considered character building. Earth, it turned out, was a nightmare. The planet had 5 major extinction events in its geological history. 5 separate occasions where the environment essentially reset itself and killed off most complex life. And humans had evolved in the aftermath of the most recent one, in an era the file called the Quaternary Period, which was apparently characterized by dramatic climate swings, megafauna predators, and continental ice sheets that advanced and retreated like the planet couldn't make up its mind about whether it wanted to be habitable. Mr. Webb, I interrupted, it says here that Earth has active tectonic plates. Oh yeah, earthquakes and stuff. California gets them all the time. And volcanic activity. Sure. Mount St. Helens went off in the 1980s. Blew the whole top off. Pretty cool, actually. And your oceans contain carnivorous megafauna exceeding 6 meters in length. Sharks. Yeah, they're awesome. I went cage diving once in South Africa. This great white came right up to the bars. Huge. Like looking into the eyes of a perfect killing machine that's been essentially unchanged for 400 million years. Magnificent animals. Krell's 4 eyes were blinking in an arrhythmic pattern I'd learned meant he was having trouble processing information. You voluntarily entered the water with these creatures. For recreation. Well, there was a cage, Webb said, like this made it reasonable. I kept scrolling through Earth's file. Your planet has atmospheric electrical discharge events called lightning that strike the surface approximately 8.6 million times per day. Storms. Yeah. Don't stand under trees. Basic safety stuff. Your dominant atmospheric gas is oxygen, which is highly reactive and corrosive at 21% concentration. I mean, we need it to breathe, so your moon is proportionally the largest satellite-to-planet ratio in the surveyed galaxy, creating gravitational stresses that result in tidal forces capable of stranding vessels weighing several tons. Don't go beach driving without checking the tide charts. That's just common sense. I looked up from the file. Mr. Webb, have you ever stopped to consider that your entire species might be suffering from severe trauma-induced normalization of threat stimuli? He paused mid-chew. What? You're broken, Krell said bluntly. Your entire species. You've been traumatized by your environment to the point where your threat assessment capabilities are fundamentally impaired. Webb laughed. Actually laughed. Okay, that's a bit dramatic. Humans are adaptable, sure, but we're not that special. You punched an armored predator, I said. It was being aggressive. You made coffee from acid rain. It was good coffee. You described a planetary environment with a 97% lethality rate as basically camping. Well, it was. The door to the conference room opened. My supervisor's supervisor, Director Krell, entered. She was a Vaxian, which meant she stood nearly 3 meters tall, and had the kind of presence that made junior officers check their uniform integrity. She'd been with the Bureau for 60 years. She'd personally classified 4 of the 9 existing Class 12 Deathworlds. She was carrying a tablet and wearing an expression I'd never seen before, fear. We have a problem, Krell said, her voice doing that subsonic thing that made my bones vibrate. A big problem. Mr. Webb, how many humans are currently serving in off-world positions? Webb shrugged. I dunno, maybe 200,000. We've got people in mining, exploration, trade, military exchange programs, academic positions. Why? Krell set the tablet on the table. It showed a map of council space with thousands of red dots spreading across multiple sectors. In the past 6 months, we've received 1,847 incident reports involving humans in classified hazard zones. Incident reports we initially dismissed as clerical errors or exaggerations. She pulled up a file. Human mining crew, Station Gamma 16, worked a double shift in a radioactive or field without proper shielding because, and I quote, the levels weren't that bad and we wanted to finish early for poker night. Radiation exposure would have killed a Corthan in 4 hours. They worked 16. Another file. Human survey team, alone, survived 32 days on a Class 9 ice world after their ship crashed. No rescue beacon, because they wanted to avoid being a bother. They built a shelter from the wreckage and hunted local fauna for food. The local fauna that we classified as inedible due to neurotoxin concentrations. Another file. Human liaison officer, assigned to a space station in a contested border zone, continued performing diplomatic duties during an active pirate siege. When asked why she didn't evacuate to the panic bunkers, she said she had meetings scheduled and didn't want to be rude. Webb perked up. Oh hey, that was probably my sister. She works in the diplomatic corps. Yeah, she mentioned something about pirates. Said it was handled. Handled, Krell repeated. Mr. Webb, she negotiated a ceasefire while the station was on fire. Several parts of the station were venting atmosphere. Sounds like Lisa, yeah. She's good under pressure. Krell sat down heavily, which for a Vaxian meant the chair groaned in protest. We've been operating under a fundamentally flawed assumption. We classified Earth as a Class 7 Deathworld based on preliminary surveys. Dangerous, but manageable with proper precautions. We now realize we were measuring the wrong metrics. I don't understand, I said. We measured environmental hazards. Predator density. Atmospheric composition. Geological instability. Krell's three eyes focused on Webb with unnerving intensity. We didn't measure evolutionary pressure. We didn't account for what it takes to produce a species that considers mortal danger to be basically camping. She pulled up another file, this one marked with the highest security clearance. I accessed the restricted anthropological data. The full survey. Do you know what we found in human history? Webb looked genuinely curious. What? You had an ice age that lasted 2.6 million years. Your ancestors survived it with stone tools and animal skins. Yeah, the Paleolithic period. We learned about it in school. You had a supervolcano eruption 75,000 years ago that reduced your global population to approximately 10,000 individuals. Your species was on the brink of extinction. The Toba catastrophe. Yeah, rough time for humanity. You domesticated wolves. Apex predators. You turned them into pets, and bred them into hundreds of varieties for different tasks. Dogs are great, Webb agreed. You invented agriculture in at least 7 different locations independently, then used it to create food surpluses that led to civilization, warfare, and eventually spaceflight. You went from bronze tools to splitting the atom in approximately 5,000 years. We're efficient. Krell leaned forward. Mr. Webb, your species spent 300,000 years evolving in an environment that was actively trying to kill you. Your evolution was shaped by predation, climate catastrophe, disease, starvation, and competition with other human subspecies. You didn't just survive Earth. You conquered it. You turned a Class 15 Deathworld into a garden. The room went quiet. So, Webb said slowly, what you're saying is that our Deathworld classifications might be a little off from a human perspective. What I'm saying, Krell replied, is that we need to create an entirely new classification system. One that accounts for human participation. Because apparently, when you put a human in a Class 12 Deathworld, they don't die. They complain about insufficient warning labels and make friends with the local predators. I pulled up the revised classification proposal I'd been working on during Web Stories. I've been drafting new guidelines. Class 1 through 11 remain the same. Class 12 gets relabeled as moderate challenge for humans, still lethal for everyone else. I'm proposing a new Class 13 through 20 scale specifically calibrated for human survival thresholds. What would qualify as a Class 20? Rel asked. I thought about it. Active stellar corona. Interior of a black hole's event horizon. I honestly don't know anymore. I'm afraid to find out what humans consider genuinely dangerous, because it might break our understanding of physics. Webb finished whatever he'd been eating and wiped his hands on his pants. Look, I didn't mean to cause a whole thing. I just thought the signage could be clearer. Maybe add some context, you know. Like, Class 12 Deathworld, bring appropriate gear. Or Class 12 Deathworld, actually pretty dangerous if you're not human. Mr. Webb, Krell said, would you be willing to consult on a revised classification system? We clearly need human input to accurately assess hazard levels. Sure, I guess. I'm between contracts right now anyway. He paused. Oh, actually, I was planning to do some backpacking on designation TR 339 next month. That's the one with the ammonia storms and the silicon-based carnivores, right? I heard the auroras are spectacular. TR 339 is a Class 11 Deathworld, I said weakly. We lost an entire research station there. Yeah, but they probably didn't have proper storm shelters. You've got to dig down at least 3 meters to avoid the worst of the ammonia precipitation. I read the geological surveys, the regolith composition is perfect for excavation. Krell and I exchanged a look. She nodded slightly. Mr. Webb, I said, how would you feel about humans being officially designated as a Class 1 galactic hazard? He blinked. What does that mean? It means, Brell said, his translator crackling with something that might have been laughter or despair, that we're reclassifying your entire species as more dangerous than most Deathworlds. Webb grinned. Cool. Does that come with a badge? 3 months later, the new classification system went into effect. Deathworld ratings now included a parenthetical, human-adjusted scale. KR 772 got officially downgraded to Class 8, human-adjusted Class 4. Webb's complaint was formally accepted and archived, and I, Junior Safety Officer Vix, started keeping a bottle of Thraxian sedative in my desk drawer for the inevitable day when a human filed a complaint about a Class 20 environment being a bit chilly but otherwise fine. That day came sooner than I expected, but that's another story.